Gail, I have started recording. Okay. And okay, I think that's basically it. Um, okay, so we're going to talk about DNA today. We've talked about it before, and if there's anybody here who really needs the primer, there's some earlier DNA presentations on our website that you can find that go a little more into detail of what is DNA and why is it useful and all the rest. We'll do a 2-minute review. So the really basics, basically everybody has 23 chromosomes, which are a matched pair, okay, that are the famous double helix that you learned about if you took biology. And so when your mother sets an egg out, the egg has 23 chromosomes. Now that simply means a little bit of each of her 23 chromosomes. It's not like it splits in any particular way. It's random. Similarly, your father has 23. When the 23 combine, you have a pair of 23. So you suddenly have what you need to have a child. And the other basic is women are on the 23rd chromosome. There's a peculiarity based on what's called the X and the Y chromosome. Women are two X's, X from mom, X from dad. Men are an X from mom and a Y from dad. So it's as simple as that. If that particular combination turns out to give you a Y, you're a guy. And if it gives you an X, you're a gal. So every day our body produces cells. Every cell reproduces exactly the DNA that it started off with. Doesn't change. There's a tiny amount of change in a lifetime, but most of the change in DNA occurs in the process of having a child. So there's a little bit of change, and it's that change that allows you to trace people. So if we match perfectly, that suggests that we have the same parentage. However, there's one more thing that happens. Inside the cell, there's a little thing called mitochondria. And mitochondria sort of manage the way the cell behaves. Okay? Mitochondria come from your mother. So I've got my mother's mitochondria. So does my sister. Okay? "23 pairs. So we'll talk briefly about Y DNA and mitochondrial DNA. So when DNA analysis started, the big thing was what's called Y DNA. Y DNA consists of looking for me. I got my Y from my father, right? He got his from his father. He got his from his father. Da 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 da. So with the exception of some very minor changes that occur as the Y chromosome passes on, okay, Y can go back 1,000 generations, 100 generations. Okay, so at that time it was considered a really neat thing. I was mentioning before the meeting that I'm studying the Sally Hemings Thomas Jefferson combination right now, and for those who don't remember, that was always considered to be hypothetical until one of the male descendants through Sally Hemings DNA was tested against one of the male descendants of not, because Jefferson didn't have any living male descendants through his wife, his first wife, but his brother's line. And when they matched, they said, gee, these people got to be related. You can't fake it. The mitochondrial is analogous, but the problem is the way our world works, the names change. So I've got a list of the 15 generations I've traced of my female ancestors, okay? And of course, there's no two names that are the same. They're all different. Whereas with the male, okay, McKinney might have been McCain, might have been, but it pretty much was the same name all the way through, unless there was what is called a non-paternal event. Um, so this is meant to illustrate a general point, which I'll just take a second on. When you pass on your DNA, it doesn't pass half of what you got from your father and half of what you got from your mother. It passes on a random amount. So it would be quite logical that you might pass 60% of what you got from your father and 40% of what you got from your mother. So over time, those combinations become quite complicated. And by the time you get 5 generations out, you may have no DNA recognizable from an ancestor. So how do we get your DNA? You purchased a test kit. How many people here have done DNA? Okay, so we have 2 don't. You, have you done a DNA test? Okay, so you're the only child, newbie. Okay, you purchase a test kit. It sends you a little thing with the swab. You swab your mouth, stuff the thing back in the package, mail it off, and then they send you the results. Now, most test companies, as we'll talk about, most test companies will give you top line results and matches because you paid for the test. But then they want to entice you to subscribe or get more stuff. So they say, if you'd really like more, here's how we can give you more. You just got to put up some more money. So they're taking your data, running it against their database of other people's data and showing matches. So we'll talk about 4 major test sites, Ancestry and 23andMe, and then we'll talk a little bit about Family Tree, DNA, and MyHeritage. Ancestry, if you are doing genealogy research and paying for a subscription to Ancestry, that's where you want to do the test. They have massive data that they can bring to bear. They have lots of analytical methods, and they're very comfortable to use. 23andMe was created with the idea that it would get FDA permission to look at your medical DNA results. So for example, it looks at the breast cancer gene, okay? I'm going to talk a little more about that later on. We were talking earlier about traits. There are a lot of fun traits to talk about. Are which of your toes is longer in your foot is a trait. Many people will test at both of those. I have, because I'm interested in the power of, I'm a subscriber to Ancestry. And 23andMe, I'm really quite interested in what they've got. The other 2 sites, Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage, offer tests, but they also allow you to simply, question? Okay, simply download the DNA data from Ancestry or 23andMe and then upload it to their website. So it sort of makes sense to do your test on one of the first 2 and then put your information over on the others. Both Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage have an amount of information they will give you for free once you've uploaded. Then they'll see if they can get you to subscribe. There are some new DNA test providers. I will simply say that at this point, they don't have a reputation that's good or bad. They just don't have a lot of usage. And the reason you do the test is because you want to compare to the largest number of people you can to see what you can get. So it doesn't make sense necessarily to be using another site. So I would not recommend that at this stage. Okay. This is almost obvious, but let me just say it. Every generation, the amount of DNA from that particular person goes down by about 1/4. just the way the math works, half and half. So if you've got a member of an older generation living, you may want to convince them to do a DNA test. My mother was still living when I got into this, and I was able to test her, and I have a much closer generational background as to what's happening in her family, which is important because hers is the one that's more complicated. Now, remember, that's a generation. That's not an age. So depending on where you sit in the overall family tree, there may be somebody who's of an earlier generation who's younger than you. Okay? It's the generation you're talking about because that's what carries the DNA. If a woman wants to have a Y-DNA test done, it's obvious that she can't have a Y-DNA test done because she doesn't have any. But her brother, her uncle, her father, if he's living, all of them have the same Y-DNA. So if you want to do a Y-DNA test, that's where to do it. Now with mitochondrial, when my mitochondrial DNA is tested, I'm testing my mother. Well, I'm testing my mother's mother and up that line. So it's testing my maternal grandmother. However, if and my father's not living, so I can't test his. But if he had any siblings, then in fact, the female children of those siblings carry that line. So I had one of my female cousins tested for mitochondrial DNA, and I now have my father's maternal grandmother. Okay, let's talk about ancestry. So, actually, let me start there a minute. Are there any questions at this point? Okay, we have a question. Can you grab a mic here? Because the people online can't hear unless somebody talks into the mic. You'll have to punch, there's a button on it. They'll turn it on, take it off. There's the little button on the left there. Press it down, it'll turn green. It should turn green.
Anything? Oh, there we go. So if I understand you correctly, if I can remember that far back, what you're saying is that if you get more relatives tested, cousins and so on, that you have more of a chance of finding grandmothers?
The short answer to that is yes, but the two big things you're looking for, one is an earlier generation, which gives you a lot more information that comes from your own DNA. The other thing you're looking for is if you want to do the mitochondrial, you're looking for someone who's the female descendant of your father's line. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit about analysis in a second, okay? You're on. Left button down here. Green comes on. You're on. Yeah, you can leave it on.
I'm sorry I was late, so you may have discussed this and I missed it. If I don't have a brother living anymore, and I certainly don't have uncles living anymore, would a nephew from my brother
Sure.
give me some of that Y-DNA?
Sure. The
Okay.
the Y-DNA passes so straight down,
Right.
okay, that you could have a great nephew. You know, the main point is from your father or his father to trace down a male.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did a study at one point we were talking about earlier where I looked at a possible non-paternal event, a child whose mother we thought we knew, but whose father we didn't know. And we tracked it down by going in each line down the men until we finally got two men that matched. Okay. Ancestry. Okay, ancestry is the workhorse. Let's look at DNA on ancestry. And we're going to look at DNA matches to start with. So I've done DNA here. And what I start off with is they will give me all of my matches. Okay, here are my daughter and my mother, close family, a grandson, a first cousin. So what they're basically doing, yeah, go ahead.
It's on? Yeah, it's on. CM, what does that stand for?
It's called a centimorgan. You can ignore it, except more is better than less. Okay? It is a measure associated with the degree of closeness between two people, the number of different places that match on their DNA.
Yeah, 23andMe uses percentages.
And that would be analogous.
Yeah, that
Okay.
to me it seems simpler, but okay, so it actually does show 9% shared.
Yeah.
So, okay. Got it.
And as we get down into the depths, what you're going to find is maybe I have someone who looks like a third cousin, but they could be a second cousin once removed, the child of a second cousin. You follow me? I mean, so there are a lot of different options, and you have to look at all of them in terms of what you know about your own genealogy.
And one thing that you said surprised me earlier, and that was that you could actually receive like 60% from one parent and 40% from another.
Of their parents.
Oh,
Okay. So when your father's DNA was passed to you, it may contain 60% of his father and 40% of his mother. Obviously, half of your DNA is from your father.
yeah, because that's what I know. My daughter has exactly 49.9%.
Yeah, but it doesn't. That's children and parents match at the 50 level. Okay, but beyond that, it can be quite random.
So, example, I have somebody who came in from Norway. He was a great grandfather, and indeed the tests do show the Norwegian origin. They don't show 12.5%. One shows
Correct.
11%. One shows 16.
Yeah, and that would be quite typical.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so one of the things that we do is we look at a particular person, and what we're looking to is what is that connection? So that's probably not a good one to look at. Let me go back a little bit here. Okay. Go down a little bit. Okay, so this is edit the relationship. And what we're showing is two things. First of all, what side that person is from, your paternal or your maternal. This one is paternal. And now these are the possible relationships given how close that person is to me. So once again, it's not automatically that it's like a first cousin. You know, beyond daughter and parent, there's not a lot that's given. You just got to work it through. Okay. We have one in my family that makes things very complicated. And if you think this one through, you'll see why. Okay. My grandfather's brother married my grandmother's sister. So their grandchildren, the brother, sister, and I match as siblings. You see why? Okay. We're promoted one level in the amount of DNA we inherited. Okay. So This is one of the things you can do with Ancestry. They are very robust in giving you that information so you could look at it and think about how do things fit. And there are cases where you have to think about half siblings. Have there been more than one marriage, more than one child? If that's the case, that other person matches half as much as they would a person who was a full sibling. Makes sense? Okay, now. Okay, this brings up a topic that I'll just throw out my biases on, ethnicity. There is not a true test for ethnicity as you would think of it. You can't test for whether or not someone is partly Polish.
150,000 retweets.
I think I'm gonna do some muting here. Okay, well, we're okay for the moment. But what they will do is look at people who currently live in these areas and say, how well do you relate to their DNA? Okay, and you get different combinations. So for example, if you were Ashkenazi Jewish, okay, there's some pretty distinct DNA associated with that group. And they'll look at you and say, okay, you got some of that in you. That's part of what you got. So trying to figure out how to get this. Unfortunately, I can't figure out how to get rid of this little faux. Oh, if somebody would go to that screen over there and hit PowerPoint. Thank you so much for reminding me. I should have done that earlier. Oh, well. Yeah, that's a little better, isn't it? Can't forget to get this thing off my screen. All right, well, we'll move this over, I hope. Yeah, basically generalize it. So there are places where that's going to be extremely accurate, okay? But other places where it's going to be pretty, so if I go to Quebec and I find that you match a lot of people in Quebec, you're French Canadian, okay? There's not much question about that. They don't move around very much. On the other hand, if I go to Eastern Europe, okay, there's a lot of moving around that's gone on, okay? So you may be part Russian, you may be part German, you may be, who knows? Okay, they do the best they can. Yeah.
So I think that explains why I've done 3 tests and none of them really match. They match for, well, 2 of them match fairly closely. My family is out the window, but the Ancestry and 23andMe are pretty close, but there are glaring discrepancies in that I've traced family mostly back to England, some
Yep.
to Scotland and a little bit in Ireland and a little bit to Germany and of course to Norway and Africa, West Africa. But I keep finding like extra Scandinavian or extra German. And I was wondering, is that because, for example, the Anglos and Saxons, they
You
maybe
bet.
can't? Okay.
One of the odd things that comes up when you study DNA for populations as a whole is there is a very strong DNA link between Scandinavia, Western Scotland and Ireland, down to Brittany. Okay. Why? Well, the Anglo-Saxons went around in boats and they left their genes behind. Okay. So I'm going to skip through this because this is not what I wanted to focus on. Maybe I can get it back here. Somehow. All right. Well, and you can see some of that here with my DNA, but I wish I could make it. No, that may make it better. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I have no Norwegian blood to my knowledge, but I sure have Scandinavian blood. Okay, because my family comes from Scotland and a little bit of Ireland. One of the other things that shows up when you do the group DNA tests, the population tests, is Scotland and Northern Ireland match a lot. Okay, they just would go back and forth and back and forth. Okay. Yep. And then back again. Yeah. Okay. One more thing I want to do here, which is the most important thing when you talk about ancestry, and that's through lines. What through lines does is you've got your family tree in Ancestry. You've posted it there. So it starts looking at the people in your family tree and saying, what do other people who are in your DNA matches have in their trees? So let me go back a couple of generations. So here is Samuel Mitchell McKinney, who is my grandfather. And right now, I am related to 4 matches through my own, he's my great-grandfather, my grandfather, 6 through his sister Polly, 2 through his sister Mary, okay, 2 through his brother Charles. You see where I'm headed here. 2 through Martha, 5 from Lucy, 9 from Nancy, and 12 from Tom. Okay, so what is the chance that the DNA is accurate when it says I probably am related to Samuel Mitchell McKinney? Pretty high, because I'm related to almost every one of his children through. So going down here, you get that information. You also get hints where they will say, oh, if you are related to this person, you know, a lot of people think this is his father. And you may be related to his father too. So why don't you investigate that? It's hand. And in some cases, very accurate. I'm doing a lot of tracking for one of my grandsons. I mentioned it earlier. And he has an adopted grandfather. And so knowing who that family is from is very important. So the hints are very important in that. Okay. Now, okay, an ancestry DNA test is normally $99. If you want traits, it's an additional $20 on a test. I would say for the most part, if you're interested in medical and traits, you want to do 23andMe. And we'll talk about that in a minute because it's much more powerful. Their subscription prices range from $25 for US only. And for the purposes of DNA analysis, that's pretty good. That's not a bad place to start. But they'll pretty soon rope you into a little bit more because we got information on that stuff that happened in Britain that you were so interested in. And then they say, you interested in military? That's fold 3. We can sort of give you a discount on that too. You know, it's sort of like the triple play if you do Comcast. Okay. Now, I'll repeat this again. You always have to upload your own family tree when you do a DNA test. And then you have to link who you are in that tree to the DNA test. If you think about it, how else does the program know who you are for the purpose of analysis? Okay. We're going to go to 23andMe now. Okay, so 23andMe has lots of different things. We'll start with what the DNA looks like. There we go. So these are the people I'm related to, who they think we're related. This is, you were pointing out the percentages earlier, their percentages. They will do a guess as to mother's and father's side connections. With any of the sites, once you pull up a person, let's pull up Jeff. Okay. So how are we related? He compares ancestry composition. Haplogroup. This is a very technical thing that's important to keep in mind. If you came through the same area, so this will be different if you were Jewish, Ashkenazi, from British, okay. You belong to a particular group, and that group goes back into generations. It would be rare that you would have a close connection with someone who doesn't belong to the same group. So my paternal group and Jeff's match perfectly. Maternal, not so much. What does that suggest? It suggests we're probably related on the father's side. Ooh, isn't this cute? 23andMe has how much Neanderthal you have. So everybody knows that Neanderthal is part of your body? Okay. No. 11% is the, no. Yeah. Okay. So what do I want to do here? And you can message people. And I would strongly recommend that if you have people in your DNA match base that you are intrigued by, send them a message and add all the information you can about where you think that relationship might be to see if they can help you. Sometimes people put these little tiny trees on, you know, they go like 2 generations. It's hard to connect. Okay. So I'm going to take Jeff again. Okay. All right. So I want to go to health and traits. So 23andMe started its business with the idea it was going to have FDA approval to tell you whether you had medically important genetic changes. So you think about the breast cancer markers. Okay, you think about cystic fibrosis. Okay. So we'll look at traits to start with. It's sort of the fun one. Traits is fun. Do you have back hair? Do you have a bald spot? Do you have cheeks as with dimples? Do you have dandruff? Do you have what's your earlobe look like? Now, these are not based on anything the FDA would ever give approval for. They are based on looking at 1 million people who've done the tests, or 2 million, and saying, how do you compare to them? They're going to tell 23andMe what their earlobe looks like. And then 23andMe is going to say, you look a lot like the average person who has that kind of earlobe. We were talking earlier that one of the fun ones is if you eat asparagus, does your urine smell funny? It turns out that's actually a thing that divides the population. Part of the population does, part of the population doesn't. You were saying earlier that you mentioned it to your brother, son-in-law. So, there you go. So that's that's not the fun stuff, because the fun stuff is actually when we go back to carrier status. Okay, so we're going to wind down. Cystic fibrosis. Where's that one that's interesting here? Sickle cell anemia, Tay-Sachs. Okay. Age-related macular degeneration, the breast cancer variants. Was telling people here that my younger daughter just had a lumpectomy today, which seems to have been okay. She seems to have been coming through fine. But she and my other daughter and my wife all went through their testing to see if they had this gene. Late onset Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, type 2 diabetes. Now, if you tested, if it said they detected a variant for Parkinson's, that would not necessarily mean that I have a true greater chance of getting Parkinson's. They just mean that of people who've had Parkinson's, this particular genetic modification has been validated as being present for some of them. Okay? So if you've got it, that means you have some evidence that you might be, that's a potential problem. Okay, we talked about all these. Wellness. There are two other things that they're working on now. One of them is pharmacogenetics. Now, if you haven't heard of pharmacogenetics, what it is a new study that's been developed. UCSF is one of the leaders in determining, based on your genetics, whether a particular drug is likely to be more effective or less effective, or you're likely to have a reaction to it. You know, we always hear about the drugs that are put out, and you say, so-and-so took the drug and didn't do anything for him, some other person took it and it did. Well, they're doing the genetic studies to say, can you make that relationship? Okay. And so this has gone beyond a sort of an academic thing. They're doing it for real at UCSF. Okay. They're into that. They're also into what they call health, by that wellness, by which they would say, for example, heart health. We can look at all of the things in our database that relate to heart health and say, here's an issue you should be thinking about or not. Okay. Way it goes. Okay. So I'm going to switch now, if I can. Yeah.
Before you get off,
Yeah.
can you hear me now? Yeah. As far as 23andMe versus Ancestry.com, do you
Yeah.
find one or the other to be more accurate? Their ethnicity or pseudo-ethnicity?
I don't think any one of them are. I think what the problem is they each have different databases. And so remember what they're doing is they're basically looking at their own data to say, what do we know about these people, Roger? Okay. And so over time, as they get more and more data, they can be more and more accurate. But they're still only taking you back to what the people in that location currently are doing. They're not truly tracking you back to your Swedish background. For example, my wife, who's all half French Canadian, half Polish, has Swedish blood. Well, would you believe the Swedes for a while ruled over Poland? Okay, so it's not illogical that she would have some DNA stuff in common with the Swedes, but it doesn't mean that anybody who in her family immigrated from Sweden. Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay.
So because of movement within people might pass,
Yeah, you have the two things. One is migration. The other one, very honest, is conquerors. Conquerors. Okay, people who came through and conquered. Yeah, and left behind DNA. Okay, I am sure that there are people in Central Russia who have German and French DNA. Okay, the Germans and the French got up to the outsides of Moscow, and they probably weren't unwilling to see leave some of their DNA behind. Okay, but then they went home, like the Normans. Yeah, good example. I've always wondered what the Sicilians would turn out to be like in a DNA match, because for those who don't know, the Normans ruled Sicily for a while, which is just weird. But the Pope was tired of having the Arabs there, and so he called in the Normans who were ready to go to the Holy Land and said, would you drive them out? Which they did. And then they said, you know, it's a nice place. We'll stay here. Okay. So now we're going to go to family tree. Oh, no, this is, we're going to go to My Heritage. There we go, My Heritage. Okay. My Heritage is creeping up as a really interesting alternative in both research and in DNA analysis. I would say if you have the money and want to do it, you want to put your DNA on the MyHeritage site. You don't have to test with them, okay? But in doing that, okay, you will find that there's some other things you'll be interested in. Now, their gimmick is when you sign into MyHeritage, they set up a website that is your family website. Okay, interesting. And so your first 250 family members you put on the website in your tree are free. But if you want to put 251 on, you got to subscribe. So it's a deal. The big thing they have is more Europeans. That as a percentage of their DNA population, they have attracted more Europeans. We found a connection for my wife's Polish side. Her grandparents came over circa 1905. Okay, but we found connections back in Poland, which have really helped us build her DNA, her family tree. Okay. Okay, so, all right, last one we're gonna look at is family tree. Okay, family tree DNA is more technical. It's got lots of nifty things you can do with it if you're technically inclined. All of these have slightly different databases of DNA, people who've done DNA tests. So there's a value to being on them. And this one's free if, in fact, you're just simply going to do some basic DNA testing. But if you're interested in the highly technical stuff, they'll be glad to charge you a little bit of money. Now, Family Tree is a little unique because they are the only company that does mitochondrial and Y-DNA. Okay, so if you want to do mitochondrial or Y-DNA, this is where you got to go. Okay, Okay. Yeah. Okay. So 23andMe. Their basic test is $119. If you want to get all the health and trait stuff, it's another $229. And they are now trying to get that's a one-time fee. They're trying to get you to get onto this pharmacogenetics. Unless you really know what you're doing, I would not recommend that at this point, but that's coming. Like with all the others, you have to upload your family tree and link it to your results. I will also comment, all of these sites have sales. Right now, you can get this for like 20% off. It's just, they regularly have the sales. My Heritage, $89. And the regular subscription is about $129. Unless you really get into it, I don't know that you need to go for the higher amount. Family tree is $79. The Y-DNA test. Why such a big range? 119 to 400. The reason is because you only need to test a small number of parts of your Y-DNA to track someone like McKinney. But if your family name was Smith, okay, you need to test a lot more to distinguish between your branch of the Smiths and other branches. What they've done is they've built family sites for all the Smiths. And you join a family, they put your DNA results on there and show you who you match. Okay, so it's a very nice deal. And then the mitochondrial is 159. Yes. Yeah, for both MyHeritage and Family Tree, you upload it from another database unless you really are obstinate and have to do it directly. Okay, but all of us, I think, do it the other way. Now, there are two of the sites I'm just going to mention. If this isn't technical enough for you, there are two sites that are more technical. GEDmatch is free. If you really get very technical, it's $10 a month. But it's a volunteer site. People take it, and it has lots of really nifty technical stuff you can do. What I do a lot of is called triangulation. In triangulation, you tie several people together by finding the common little part of the genome that they're on. So I can say, gee, I know these other two people and I match with Samuel Mitchell McKinney. And you know, we match on chromosome 10 in this little region here. So, you know, I've got a pretty good guess. That's where Samuel Mitchell is in my body. You follow me? So you can do that. Then you can look at other people and say, I have no idea who this person is. But you know what? They match me the same place the other people do. And they have a strong enough match that they may, in fact, be another one of Samuel Mitchell's kids. And using that, I have found a situation where one of my cousins, on his way to Vietnam, through Los Angeles, not Los Angeles, what's the south of Los Angeles? San Diego, through San Diego, left behind a memento. A memento. So somebody who did not know who her father was, okay, well, okay, then there's another one which is extremely technical. Okay, that's it. Take any questions. Oh, before we change topics, next month we're going to do German genealogy, and we're going to focus on an expert's coming in to do that. I don't do that. We're going to focus on how to find where in Germany your family is from. Okay, just in case that's of any interest. Then in January, we don't have a December meeting. In January, we're going to do religious records. And in February, we're going to talk about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson and look at all the interesting things there. Okay, any questions? Okay, there's a hand up. Somebody unmute and give me the question. Is that
Hi,
Roger? Go.
I'm Terry Parker,
Hi.
and hi. A couple of years ago, when I was really doing my family tree intensely, I was looking for a great grandmother who was about 5 generations out through a matrilinear line. So it was recommended to me to have my mitochondrial DNA tested, which I did.
Yep.
And meanwhile, I was able to find her the old-fashioned way through the historic records.
Right.
Now, every now and then I get an email saying that, oh, we found yet another mtDNA relation of yours. But unlike how easy Ancestry.com makes it with the through lines, I have no idea how to use the results of the mtDNA analysis that I had, because it's all seems to be based on what people say is their understanding of their lineage. Do you have any recommendations or
Well,
suggestions?
there are two. First of all, you will see how many steps removed you are from this person. That on the left-hand side of the screen you get, it'll say I'm 0 steps, 1 step, 2 step. Okay, that's a good indication about how far back this connection's likely to be. Remember, you literally could be matching with somebody who was born in 1400. Okay, because that might be where the common connection is. Because with the mitochondrial, it just keeps going. What I look for is to do my own little bit of research around the people I see. And with that, I've been able to validate a couple of generations. I never have been able to validate them, well, except for great-grandmother level. Never validated them through the actual online trees. I just had to do some of my own research. Okay? Sorry. That's what I said. It's always the dang the problem with women. They get their names changed.
Well, yeah. mtDNA is a little more challenging. You're right.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll see you next month, and I will stop the recording now.
I actually do have a quick question.
Go.